Well, did you ever feel like it's just not supposed to be this hard? It's not supposed to be this hard. I feel like that a lot. Usually because of something else that I already did. But really just in life, it's like it's not supposed to be this hard. Recently, my son Alex bought a car. And you have to register that. You have to put the plates on. And so we transferred that. And putting plates on a car is supposed to be easy. Zip, 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 zip. Okay, there, it's done. No, okay, because on his car, it's not just a piece of plastic that you just, kind of screw harder, and make the bolt fit in there. No, in his car, he's got, in the metal, he's got these pre-inset nuts that you're supposed to, screw these very particular threaded bolts into. Well, when it was time for us to put the plates on, they were so rusted out, the threads were so rusted out, you try to put that bolt in there, so rusted out that you're either going to, break the bolt or strip the threads or whatever. So a 3-minute job becomes hours trying to make the modifications. There are enough fasteners holding it on there. They don't match. They're not in the same place. They're not in the right spot. But we made it work. But it's not supposed to be that hard. I recently picked up this a used table saw. It was basically a gift. There was some activity, but I won't go into that. The point is, when I got it home, a table saw is supposed to have an on-off switch. On, off. Okay, power to the motor, a little switch loop, on, off. No, this had a whole, electrical control box mounted to the side, not original parts at all, on, off, and with behind it some kind of special relay, and it wasn't really wired the best way, and it needed to be cut apart to make it be able to transport. So I'm connecting it back up. I'm not an electrician or an engineer, and I'm doing my best to get it. And I got it running, and then I put it back together, and it doesn't run. And then I take it apart, and it does run. And then I find out that the relay behind it is gravity sensitive, and so when I held it, it worked. And then when I mounted it, it was upside down. It's not supposed to be that hard to turn on a table saw. And we watch our elite athletes at work, and we know that they're good and they should be reliable. And then they get into these weird slumps where it's like they're not doing very well. They're not producing the way that they're expected to, the way that that they can do it. And they're getting so fancy, they're getting so complicated with all these things that they're trying to do. They're making it too hard. A coach often takes them back to the basics, back to some fundamentals of their game. But things get too complicated, too fancy, too sophisticated. Most of us in this room are not elite athletes. I certainly am not. But just us, just people, just regular people, what do? Just like all those other things, we make things too complicated, too awkward, too exhausting, too hard. Personally, we don't just go through life, we have to become experts on health and fitness and work and diet and exercise and medicine and epidemiology, and I'll stop there. We go to work. Oh, you can't just know how to do your thing. You have to become an expert in productivity, technology, leadership. You got expert in all this stuff. You're expected. You go on home. Oh, you and your wife better be doing all the hip things with marriage and raising kids, parenting. Now it's adulting. It used to be just life, but now it's adulting. You got all the hip ways. Education. How you spend your money, you better be doing it right because we're judging you. Got to get fancy, got to get complicated. We come to church and oh my goodness, you read every last book from every big church, from every small church about everything that's going on, and then there's that guy on YouTube, and he's telling you all the things that nobody else will tell you, and he's telling the truth because no one will hire him, so he didn't bow to the institutions. Okay, it's just not supposed to be this hard. But like those athletes that sometimes just need to get back to basics, the fundamentals of their game, Sometimes we just need to get back to basics. We can get all twisted and tangled up in all the complicated and sophisticated ways of doing things. We're trying to be advanced. Really, we're just confused and out of sorts. A good, solid dose of the fundamentals would go a long way to help our outlook, to make our souls just feel a bit better. So that's where we're going. The next 3 weeks, back to basics. First, today, our place in all of this. And then next week, our goals in all of this. And then finally, how we're going to be graded in all of this. It's good to know these things. These are basic foundations, but reminders about them will go a long way. So today, it doesn't have to be like this. I think many of us are just tired. You know what I mean? I think we're just tired. I don't mean tired after a long day, or tired because you stayed up too late last night. Again. I mean tired like deep down in our souls. All that stuff that I mentioned earlier, personally, at work, at church, at home, trying to keep up with all that stuff. We keep trying harder and harder and harder, trying to do all of the advanced life skills, trying to impress, ourselves, with how smart we are, with our abilities, with all our accomplishments. We're trying to impress with all this prestige, and yet many of us are just tired, exhausted from all the work and never living up to the expectations, never being all that we're supposed to be in all of this. So we're discouraged or angry or depressed. And we're set off because we're on edge. We're set off by regular things in life. You can feel it out there. I can. Things that really shouldn't bother people all that much. We're on edge, so we're angry about everything all the time, ready to fight. I really believe right now we're in a pandemic of weariness. A pandemic of weariness is our struggle, as much as the other things. So you might have this terrible feeling, if you're like me, maybe that things just don't fit like they ought to. Things just aren't right. I don't fit in this world like I used to, not like it's supposed to. It's not supposed to be this hard. It doesn't have to be like this. Jesus offers us an alternative life to all of this. If your soul is tired, try Jesus. I'll say it again. If your soul is tired, try Jesus. Sounds simple. Should. That's what we're looking for. The people of Jesus' day, they were tired. They were exhausted. He needed to speak life to them. He needed to speak comfort to them. I wanted to remind you that these basics that we're going to talk about, Jesus is our coach. We talk about coaches getting their guys back to basics. Jesus is our coach. So we're going to listen to his words in these next few weeks. Today we'll be listening to Jesus from Matthew chapter 11, but before I get there, I just wanted to remind you that the people of Jesus' day, who he was talking to in Matthew 11, they were caught in this religious system. They were all caught up. It was controlled by spiritually elite religious people. But Jesus was telling people, hey, it's not about it. Jesus was telling people the good news is about knowing God's heart and following after that. It's not just about following after all of the rules, knowing all of the right things and all of the right words and following all of the elite people in your religious system. So Jesus was getting a following. People were enjoying what he had to say, and yet at the same time, there was growing opposition to Jesus. At this point in his life and his ministry, there were a lot of people who were starting to go against him, especially those who controlled the system, the people who benefited from having control in this very difficult, complicated religious system. He was gaining popularity with some, but opposition from others. See, they were religious. They were very sophisticated. they they followed all of the very complicated, sophisticated rules. They used all of the right words, and it was exhausting. I mean, they were exhausted, and we know what that's like. They had to get the approval. They were doing everything they could to get the approval of all of the right people, and that's the same for us today. Doing our best, trying to get the approval of all the right people, and it could be religious, or it could be just religious style commitments to all the causes that we belong to. Either way, if you're trying to gain the approval of all of the right people, then that's what you're always going to be doing, trying. But never knowing if you got it. Trying to get the approval, but never knowing if you got it. You can never have that certainty. Jesus says it doesn't have to be like this. If your soul is tired, try Jesus. But first, Jesus is going to make an invitation, but first, Jesus says is if your soul is tired, check yourself. Wait, he's going to make an invitation, but before he even makes the invitation, he wants to remind you, you better make sure you're ready to receive it. He's making the invitation, but you can get in your own way before you come to Jesus. So you better check yourself, make sure you're actually ready to receive what he's offering. And so first, when he says check yourself, he means check your attitude. So we're going to look at these words from Matthew 11 and verse 25 and verse 26, where he's going to say that it's God's will that he's going to hide the truth about Jesus, who he is and what he does, from some people, but reveal it to other people. Look at these words in chapter 11, verse 25 and 26. At that time, Jesus declared, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and understanding and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. Hidden these things from the wise and understanding. You understand, Jesus is not being anti-intellectual. He's not being anti-wisdom. He's not being anti-academic. It's not an anti-intellectual thing. It's an attitude thing. Because, we all know people who have, lots of education, lots of academic letters after their name, right? And we also know people who don't have much formal education at all, maybe finished high school and only then so they could play sports. But either way, some of these people have the same attitude, right? Pride. Know so much. I know it all. I know everything I need to know. Nobody can teach me. I got it all under control. Jesus says God is hiding the truth from the people who know it all. He's going to reveal it to, he says, little children. It's not that Jesus is only going to reveal truth to little babies. It just means that people who are so dependent, who are passive, who are coming to God with trust and who want to learn from him, ready to receive what he's offering. He says, ready to reveal the truth to these folks. And so he says, hey, before you come to Jesus, you better check yourself. You better check your attitude. He's going to hide the truth from those who are so smart, but he's going to reveal it to those who are really ready to learn from him. So if your soul is tired, you check yourself first, you check your attitude. Then, second, you check your accomplishments. Look at verse 27. Verse 27, he says, all things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Check your attitude, check your accomplishments. You see, you might have done a lot. You might have done a lot. You might have given up a lot. You might have worked hard even for God or for God's kingdom. You might have given a whole life to him, but you might have done a lot, but none of us has done enough to earn God's friendship. No one has done enough to buy that backstage pass to heaven. No one has done enough to be able to earn that relationship, to deserve God's favors. Can't do it. can't know God on your own, can't work enough, can't figure it out enough. No one truly, fully knows God the Father or God the Son except God the Father and God the Son. There's no authority. There's no system. There's no way that in this universe that anyone figures out and is good enough and earns and works to a relationship, to that friendship with God that we're looking for. There's no religion. There's no sacrifice. There's no work, no matter how well intended it comes from us, that gets us this relationship with God. Jesus is the only way to God the Father. This is exclusive. He offers it freely, but only freely. Check your attitude and check your accomplishments before you come to God. Check them both at the door. If your soul is tired, check yourself, because if you're going to God with a resume, you're not ready. Look at what I know. Look at what I've done. Jesus says God is right now actively hiding the truth from you. If we go to God, however, with our hands empty and open to what he gives, Jesus says God's going to pour his Spirit out on us. The truth is coming our way when we come to him with this attitude, with open hands, without a resume. If your soul is tired, check yourself. And then, and this is where we spend most of our time, if your soul is tired, come to Jesus. That's it. If your soul is tired, come to Jesus. It's the most basic of the basics, the most foundational of levels of what we can be or do in our lives. Come to Jesus. Now, don't miss it. It's not come to self-help. It's not come to Facebook. It's not even come to church. Coming to Jesus is the most basic. So therefore, it's going to change us on the most foundational of levels. Sounds simple, and it is, but the simple things are the most foundational, the most fundamental. That means they change us the most when we come. And so let's look at Matthew 11, verse 28 and 29, where Jesus goes on, and he makes this invitation. Once you've checked yourself, Jesus says in verse 28, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." A couple of fundamental changes here in these verses that we'll see. First, change your leader. Jesus says, "Come to me." Come to him. Jesus is a person. He's not a book. He's not a YouTube channel. Jesus is a person. Jesus is a leader. He's not just a motivational speaker. He's not just a guru. He's your leader. Everyone follows someone. You might think you're not following anyone but yourself, but the same still goes, and the results are always the same. If you're following someone that's not Jesus, the results are always the same. Working and worrying about approval. If you're accepted. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of sick of people who are bullying other people into trying to get their approval. This is the world that we live in. People who browbeat, people who are angry, people who yell. The problem is when we get sick of bullies, see, we're really good at spitting them out, but the problem is we usually just replace them with other bullies who say we want them to say for a while. No, that's not Jesus. Jesus is different. Jesus is gentle. Jesus is humble. Jesus is meek. Imagine that. A leader who cares about how you're doing, who's careful, who's never harsh. I mean, these are the leaders that we want to be, but we always seem to fall short of this. Jesus is different. Jesus encourages you in good paths, but he won't beat you up if you start to lose focus. He's gentle when he guides, when he pulls you back to where you ought to be. If you're tired of leaders who use shame, who use bullying, who use name-calling, who use embarrassment to try to get people what they want to do, come to Jesus. He's not just another leader who fights, the powers and then browbeats the little people into doing what he wants. Jesus is a different kind of leader. If you're tired, change your leader. And this is the gospel of Jesus Christ. I've been following every leader in the world, including myself, as number one, and it all leads to the same place: sin, suffering, making a wreck of life, destruction. I've messed things up. I've tried everything, and this is the gospel. I know who I am, and it's not perfect, and it's not right, but I know who Jesus is. He came to this earth as a man like me, yet who did not sin, who did not mess things up, who was only right and good and lived that perfect life and then died on the cross for me, because that should have been me. Took my punishment on the cross, all the shame, all the embarrassment, took it, buried it, rose again. And the gospel is this: when we come to Jesus as our leader and say, Jesus, I know that I'm that sinner, but you're not. I know that you took the punishment. I know that you offer your righteousness to me. Save me, forgive me, change me, and lead me. He says, whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. He says, you are mine. That's the gospel. That's what happens when we pick a new leader, when we change our leader. And so he's a different kind. And when we come to Jesus, we change our leader. And the next, we change our identity. Next, we change our identity. And we see another fundamental, basic change coming in. Well, we already read verse 29, but again, we're going to look at it because there's another basic, foundational part of us that needs to change. And so it's a big deal. See, coming to Jesus doesn't just mean changing who that leader is out there in front of us. It means changing who we are. Change your identity. Look again at verse 29. He says to take my yoke upon you and learn from me. This is about defining who you are. These kinds of words, this kind of language, it's actually follower kind of language. It's not following someone from a distance. It's not following somebody in the newspaper, magazine, or YouTube channel from afar, somebody that you don't know that doesn't know you. It's to identify yourself, to take my yoke upon you. They would have understood. It's to say, this is how I want to be known by everyone. This is who I am. I am a different kind of person. It's to be known. Jesus says, take my yoke upon you. It means to be known as one of his, to be known as his follower or disciple. The people in Jesus' day, they would have known a couple of things when he used this yoke metaphor. When he used it, their minds would have gone to some certain understandings. A yoke was a farming implement. Used to bind the farm animals together. You see that beam across the shoulders that was tied to the plow. So that bound those animals together to the plow, to the work, and to their master. And that was what was happening with the farm, and so the people understood that. But more importantly for us, the people would have also understood that the idea of taking up a yoke was also just kind of common language for identifying with some kind of teaching, some kind of leader. To take up the yoke would be to say, I am this kind of person. I'm following that teacher. I'm following that way of life. They already understood that. That kind of language was used in the Hebrew scriptures and in their day, to take up the yoke. And so they were identifying. And Jesus says, stop identifying with all this work of difficulty, of trying to live up, of trying to be this kind of person, of all this religious complexity. He says, because they knew they already had taken up a yoke, he says, put that down, take up mine. He says, stop following all of that and follow me and be one of mine. So when you change your leader and take up his yoke, you're changing who you are because you're identifying now with him as his own, as his kind of person. And here's the thing. When Jesus gives you a new identity, he gives it. It's not earned. You see, whether it's ancient religions or more modern issues that we talk about, like nationalism or ethnicity or our sexual identity or orientation, political party or preferences, or even being a sports fan, you have to keep working all of the time, incessantly, to prove that you're a real fill in blank. It's not enough to just be like a patriotic citizen. You have to think this way, vote this way, talk this way, or you're not a real American. If you don't, like these sports and these outdoor activities and these kinds of leaders, you're not a real man. It's not enough that you have these political preferences and that you try to influence everybody all the time about them. You also have to belittle the other side, or you're not a real conservative or progressive or whatever it is. It goes on and on. It's exhausting, right? Even our sports teams, our pro sports, which are supposed to be a pleasant distraction, from the most important things. Oh my goodness, you're not a real fan unless you have all the right stuff, unless you have all the right childhood memories, unless you believe all the right kinds of activities, that you do all the stuff, and most importantly, that you hate that other team. Oh my goodness, it's exhausting keeping up with what it means to prove that you're a real whatever it is. When you come to Jesus, he gives you the identity. You don't have to earn it, and that is a relief. He gives it. We don't go to him with a resume. We don't go to him with works and accomplishments and prestige to prove that we are a real Christian or a Jesus follower or a disciple of his. He gives us the identity when we come to him, and what Jesus gives, no one takes away. They can't. It's permanent. So right now, maybe some of you are thinking, yeah, I know this, Eric. I came to Jesus last year, or 5 years ago, or 10 years, or 20, or 50 years ago. Didn't I do this already? Shouldn't this already be it? Well, yeah. Yes and no, right? When we come to Jesus, that's it. That's permanent. That's true. That when it's a matter of our first moment of salvation, it's happened. Our identity has changed, our leaders changed. That's all true. But the problem with people is, unlike farm animals, we can put a yoke on, we can take it off. So we can feel ourselves chafing, pulling against the direction of that yoke, pulling against the direction of Jesus, and we're tired and we're weary and things aren't feeling right, aren't fitting right. We're not responding well, our attitude's bad, and sometimes we just need to get back to Jesus. We can't lose that salvation. We can't lose that identity, but sometimes we pull against it. So sometimes we just got to get back to Jesus. Change your leader. Coming to Jesus means change your leader. Change your identity. And third, change your life. Come to Jesus is to change your life. Changing, again, the most basic, most fundamental part of who we are and how we see ourselves and how we see ourselves fitting into all of this. Change your life. See, along with a new leader and along with a new identity comes a new and different kind of lifestyle. It's not going to be the same. It has to be different because we've taken up this new identity, this new leader. And then we look at verse 30 and we see a little bit more description of what Jesus is talking about. And he says, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Oh, easy. Christian life, easy peasy, no problems. So you might be asking, wait, what? Are you telling me that the Christian life is always easy with no problems? Because if you are, I'm done. I'm out of here. And you would have every right to make that question, to have those doubts, if that's what that really means. Because as much as I'd like to tell you that's what this really means, we know it doesn't. We know that's not what that means. We know that's not what that means for Christians around the world throughout all of time. We know that that's not true for the Christians who are in this room or for those who are joining us online. That's not the Christian life, and that's not what this means. In fact, we understand that we live in the same world. We live in the same sinful, fallen, troubled, hard-working, toilsome world as everyone else. And that we suffer from the same bad consequences of the same bad choices, the same bad people, ourselves included, as everyone else. The difference isn't what world we live in. The difference is how we go through it and who we go through it with. When he says my yoke is easy, easy is a good word, but it's a little bit hard to understand for the reasons that we just mentioned. The word easy could be used to talk about people, and when it talks about people, it means kind. But a yoke, that thing that sits on the animal's shoulders, okay, you wouldn't call that kind. When the word is applied to, that original word in Matthew's language, when the word is applied to things, it usually means good. And so it could be a good yoke, but that doesn't mean much for us either, so it's hard. You know what it really means here when it says my yoke is easy? Really what that means is it's fitting. It fits well. It's custom made for the one that's wearing it. That's what my yoke is easy means. Jesus gives us a yoke that fits us well, that doesn't crush our soul when we live according to his lifestyle. See, to be loyal to the systems of this world, to anybody else besides Jesus. Do the same thing with the same burden, with the same yoke, with the same rules. It's a one-size-fits-all. Everybody do the right thing, say the right thing, and it's too much to bear, but not so with Jesus. Those are cults of personality. Everybody do this and say this. Those are all the religions, the religious systems, the ones that have more rules than God. That's those. These are the causes that ask for everything from us and then spit us out when they use us up. Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus doesn't use us as a disposable tool like all of the religious systems of man-made rules and regulations. Jesus blesses you. And then he blesses the world through you. That's his yoke. That's his burden. You see these words here. Yoke is easy, burden is light. What they're really describing is what Jesus already promised earlier, and that word is rest. Rest. Jesus said, come to me, I'll give you rest. He said, take my yoke, you will find rest for your souls. And then these words just explain that lifestyle a little bit more. Again, it's reasonable to ask, wait a second, is really true that you're supposed to take up a work instrument like a yoke to find rest? I understand, it's a good question, but in the Bible, the Hebrew scriptures of the Old Testament, and in Jesus' day, the idea of rest, it meant first, when applied to people, spiritual life, it meant salvation from sin. It meant deliverance from slavery and oppression of sin. That's what it meant first. But then it also meant a rest lifestyle, which is following Jesus, staying close to God, living in his way, faithfulness to God and his work. Yeah, there is work to be done, but it's rest because you don't have to work to prove yourself. You don't have to work to stay in his favor. You just stay close and follow him. It's rest because it refreshes and nourishes the soul of the one who comes. Yeah, there's work, but he's always going to prepare you for the work. He's always going to make you ready for the work that he asks. He offers this to whoever comes to him in faith plus nothing. It's rest. It's rest because it's a real partnership with Jesus. Everyone takes up some yoke. When you come to Jesus, now he's the one that's with you. He's with you. You take up Jesus' yoke, you're with him. You could take up anyone's yoke, but then you'd be with them. It's rest with Jesus because then you're with him. That means he's the one who's next to you guiding. He's the one who's next to you teaching, encouraging. He's the one that whispers that encouragement in your ear to keep going. He's the one that knows what's needed in your life and in the world and how to get you there. He knows what you can do. He knows how you can be your best. He knows how you can do your best. And that's exactly how he leads every single time. If you're tired, connect yourself to Jesus and nobody else and nothing else. Everyone else, boy, they want to make you loyal to them so that you'll overlook it when they fail. Jesus doesn't fail. He's always faithful to us. He's always good to us. He will not fail. So if you're tired, try Jesus. And if you're still tired, try him again. And if you're tired again, try him again, because he's all we got. He's the only one. He's the only place to go. Come to Jesus. We're trying to figure out our place in all of this. There's only one place that gives us rest. Go to Jesus and know our place is with him. Let me ask you some questions. Before we finish up, let me ask you some questions. Before we go, number one, have you felt yourself seeking approval too much from people? Like, if I'm going to make this decision, how would so-and-so feel about it? I came across that even this week when I had to make some financial decisions that I didn't really want to. I'm okay. When I wanted to make some, we're going to be all right. But they weren't the best. They weren't the ideal financial decisions. And I thought, boy, such and such Christian speaker would not be happy with me. And then I thought, you know what? I don't work for him. I don't even know him. So I just know Jesus. He'll be all right. I need to go to Jesus. He'll give me rest. He won't bully me into submission. Number two, do you feel pressure to measure up to who you're supposed to be? See, that's not from Jesus. That's from someplace else. If we feel pressure to constantly be, this is the person I'm supposed to be, I got to work for it, I got to prove it, that's not from Jesus. Number three, are you tired of trying to find your place in all of this but still not fitting? It's kind of like this convulsion that we all feel sometimes. I don't fit in all of this. Are you tired of trying to find a place and still not fitting in this world? If your answers to any or all of these are yes, I just encourage us. Humble yourself. Come to Jesus. Or come back to Jesus and rest. Father, as we've looked at your invitation through Jesus Christ to be your own, let us find rest. Remind us. Let your Spirit remind us throughout the day, throughout the week, that if we're just not fitting, and if things just aren't right, and if it's not supposed to be this hard, that we can always try Jesus a little bit more, that we can find him faithful. There's so much difficulty, so much complicated rules and words and trying to get everything right to please everybody. Lord, thank you that you've rejected our resumes, but you've accepted us. And so let us come. Father, we pray for those who've never made that decision for Jesus, that today would be the day, that they would find someone here, they would click on the button online, that they would speak with someone, but most importantly, that they would come to Jesus. Lord, as we prepare to finish up and leave and go be a part of your work in our worlds, let us do so with the same grace, with the same invitation as Jesus. That through us, and through that love, the world would see you. No more human leaders. No more human systems. Lead people to yourself through Jesus. Let us be part of that work. Always and forever. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.